I did a video with Andy Fellows about the cult he left a while back, Teal Swan. We talked about the origins of the group, their belief system, and some other stuff. Hours after releasing the video, Teal Swan released a video addressing whether or not she's a cult leader. Was it connected to my interview with Andy? Probably not, but she went on the defensive about it, so let's take a look at her reasoning. Let's get into it.
This paranoia has in fact led to people accusing me of being a cult leader and the people who follow my material of being a cult. That's a very serious thing to say. It's something most people don't really understand when they're saying it. Now, it's a derogatory term used as an attacking ad hominem to discredit, invalidate, and dehumanize spiritual or religious groups. People use the word loosely and flippantly as an insult, not knowing just how serious an accusation this really is.
So she's saying people don't really understand what they're saying when they accuse her of being a cult leader. Now, I understand some people might not know what they're saying, but I assure you, I do. And so do lots of my followers, and Andy Fellows followers. We've built our careers off of understanding what a cult is, how they come to power, and how they maintain that power. I do not throw that word around lightly. When I use it, I mean it. Let's continue.
In today's world, if all it takes to be a cult leader is to have a devoted following on social media, and therefore lots of influence on public opinion, then every celebrity could be accused of being one.
I promise that's not all it takes to be a cult leader, and you know that, but we'll get there.
The first thing to understand, before I go any further, I am a personal transformation revolutionary. I am not a cult leader. Teal Tribe is a shared personal growth community based on the information and the material that I create. Teal Tribe is not a cult.
Okay, well, let's look at the evidence and I'll determine that for myself. This is actually a good place to explain the difference between the cult and the cult leader, their naming system. The group is called Teal Tribe. The leader is Teal Swan, or just Teal. Sometimes I refer to them synonymously, but I wanted to make sure I had the correct usages on record.
2 PhDs, Yanya Lalich and Michael D. Lanagon, in association with the ICSA, created a cult checklist, a way to tell if a group is in fact a cult or not. I'm going to focus on their assessment for the sake of this discussion.
For those of you who watch my channel, you'll know I usually use the BITE model. This list she's using is actually a perfectly acceptable list to use. It was created before the BITE model was, and it was done with the backing of the academic community. Stephen Hassan built his BITE model off of lists like this, though not just this one exclusively. The BITE model didn't go through the academic process, so it can't really be used in, say, a courtroom, for example. Yet. Hassan is working on that at this moment, but it doesn't mean it's not useful. Most of the points on this model apply specifically to religious cults, where the BITE model can apply more broadly to political cults or cults of personality. But they share a lot of the same points anyways. The BITE model has some other useful utility, which is why I picked it in the first place when I started researching this stuff. But if you're going to use the BITE model, then you're probably going to want to use the influence continuum too, which is a model written up to determine if influence is healthy or unhealthy. For my purposes, the BITE model does the job really well. But as I said, this list is also perfectly acceptable. The important part is understanding the material really well before throwing words around. Anyways, let's take a look at our first defense against this model.
The group displays excessively zealous and unquestioning commitment to its leader, and whether he is alive or dead, regards his belief system, ideology, and practices as law.
This point doesn't really have a direct BITE model equivalent, but you could say divide information into insider versus outsider doctrine is pretty close. If you notice, the BITE model is mostly about the level of control cults exert over people, more than the belief system. You can see how this model focuses more on groups with a specific belief system. Let's hear a response to this point.
I ask that people have unwavering commitment to themselves, and part of this, which is a cornerstone of everything that I teach, is in fact questioning. Unless you're questioning things, including yourself, most especially yourself, and the things that you're learning, there's no way to find out what is true for you personally, and so there's no way to actually build a life for yourself that is in alignment with your authentic truth.
Okay, first of all, there is no true for yourself. If you're making a truth claim, then it's either true or it isn't. Your ideas or feelings don't fit into the equation at all. And to address her other point about her encouraging questioning, yeah, I think she encourages questioning the same way young Earth creationists encourage questioning about evolution. Asking questions and figuring out how things operate is a good thing, but directing your questioning at anything that opposes you and not turning the critical eye inward toward Teal Swan isn't questioning. It's directed skepticism, and it's part of information control. Let's continue.
2. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished. I encourage questioning. Questioning is, in fact, what I'm all about. My series, Ask Teal, is all about questioning. Me on stage, it's all about questioning. On top of this, I find doubt actually to be quite healthy.
The bite model equivalent to this one would be rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, and doubt. So she finds doubt to be healthy, but doubt directed toward what? Directed toward her own belief system? If somebody comes out and starts questioning her quote-unquote teaching materials or her ideas, is she going to call it equally as healthy? That's basically what I'm doing here. Is she in favor of this video, or is she going to call me an apostate, a disbeliever, a dissenter, or the word she uses to describe people who doubt and question her materials, a hater?
3. Mind-altering practices are used in excess and serve to suppress doubts about the group and its leaders. No consciousness-altering states are encouraged by me or used by people who follow my material for the purpose of suppressing. Why?
Whoa, hold on. Let's listen to that one more time.
No consciousness-altering states are encouraged by me or used by people who follow my material.
Oh. Well, that's comforting. I'm glad to hear you don't use any mind-altering practices.
For the purpose of suppressing, because suppression is something that I actively teach against.
Oh, so they do use mind-altering practices. It's just not intended to be used for the purpose of suppressing. I don't really care what the intended use is. What's the end result? That's all I really care about when we're dealing with this subject specifically. I don't care if a cult leader walks into it with the best of intentions. It's completely irrelevant. What matters is whether or not the group uses mind-altering practices and whether or not those mind-altering practices serve to suppress doubts. Now, she's right. She does teach against suppressing your darker nature. It's part of the belief system. But we aren't talking about suppressing your darker nature. We're talking about suppressing doubts about the belief system. Completely different things.
The leadership dictates, sometimes in great detail, how members should think, act, and feel. For example, members must get permission to date, permission to change jobs, permission to marry, or leaders prescribe what types of clothes to wear, where they can live and can't live, whether or not to have children, and so forth. Like every other person, I have ideas and opinions about what the healthiest thing for people to do and to think is. Like every other spiritual leader, my opinion is in fact the cornerstone of my entire career.
So the point on this model is the leadership dictates how members should think, act, and feel. Then she takes the examples they listed and says, I don't do those things.
I don't tell people who to date, who to marry. They don't need my permission for any of this. I don't tell them what job they can have or not have. I don't tell them whether they can or can't have children.
Those were just examples. That isn't the entire point. The point is that you dictate how people should act, think, and feel. As she said, that's the cornerstone of her career. That's what she's all about. That's what the group is all about. Unity on thoughts, feelings, and actions. That's the cornerstone of a cult, changing people's personalities to be something other than authentic. Behavior modification through a set of rules and a system of rewards and punishments for breaking those rules. Not every religion is like that, but the ones that are cults. If they're trying to influence you in a destructive way by getting you to lean on their doctrine rather than your conscience, it's destructive influence. If they're trying to encourage obedience to their methods and way of living rather than free will, it's destructive influence. Let's continue.
If people ask for my opinion, I will give it to them. I will give it strongly. It is then their decision whether to adopt that opinion or not.
Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and Scientologists say the exact same thing. It's your decision, but there are consequences, social or otherwise, for not making the quote-unquote right decision. Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you it's a free choice, but if you choose wrong, you lose everything. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case with Teal Tribe, but this is a pretty common cult tactic. People are free to do what they want. They can come and go as they please. But then they fail to mention the fact that there are consequences for doing the thing they don't want you to do. Even if it's as simple as social essentially shunning people, even if it's not enforced by the leader. If the culture is one where people will shun you or back away as friends or whatever if you do something they don't like, then it's a cult. The leader's intentions are completely irrelevant. Ultimately, the leadership is who forms out the culture in these things, because people look up to them. Technically, in Jehovah's Witnesses, you won't face consequences for having a relationship with a disfellowshipped family member. But people don't know that, because that's part of the culture. Your friends, the people around you, will treat you differently if you do.
5. The group is elitist, claiming a special exalted status for itself, its leaders, and members. For example, the leader is considered the Messiah, a special being, an avatar, or the group and/or the leader is on a special mission to save humanity. I think all people alive today, regardless of whether or not they are associated with my material or not, whether they've even heard of me or not, have an incredibly, very, very special role to play in the overall health, well-being, and ultimately survival of the human race. Because of this, all people on Earth are special because they have this very special role to play in that overall picture of health of human life on Earth. I am playing one of these special roles.
Yeah, this is all fluff. It's all an excuse for giving herself special exalted status. This is the important part right here.
I am playing one of these special roles.
So I'm checking this one off. I don't care what your justification is for meeting one of the points on the cult checklist. If you meet the point, then you meet the point. I'm counting it as a loss for you. Or more accurately, I guess a loss for your followers. Probably more of a win for you.
6. The group has a polarized us versus them mentality, which may cause conflict in the wider society. I am not alone in recognizing that there are some very important things about society which have to change in order for human life and every other form of life on Earth to be in a state of well-being. I'm dedicated to making these changes. I want people to make these changes. If there isn't some kind of evolution within society and the world itself with each generation, what are we doing here? That being said, an us versus them mentality is the exact opposite of what I teach. Why? Because I teach oneness and I teach integration.
Actually, there is a lot of conflict with wider society. What she teaches is something like an embrace the darker side of your personality type of philosophy. Kind of like saying people should be true to themselves, and if they're really dark inside, they should let it out. It leads to some of her followers being very aggressive trolls. They'll burn you to the ground over anything, or nothing at all. All the rest of this is irrelevant. This whole oneness and integration bit doesn't matter. There is conflict between her followers and wider society because of the things she teaches. Just sit back and read the comments on my other Teal Swan videos. There's some fairly aggressive hate to be found there, and there probably will be on this one too, unless they make it this far in the video and decide to prove me wrong. Doesn't really matter anyways, I have the evidence from my other comment sections.
7. The leader is not accountable to any authorities, unlike, for example, teachers, military commanders, or ministers.
Okay, this one is going to take some time to debunk. First of all, nobody said or even implied that you were above the law, or that you think that you're above the law. You definitely aren't, obviously, considering the fact that you got in legal trouble for giving psychology advice without a license. We're all well aware that you're subject to the law.
Everyone is accountable to something or someone who could be seen as having more authority in a situation than they do. That includes me. I'm not exempt from the law.
But we aren't talking about accountability to the law, though that has been a big problem for cult leaders in the past. We're talking about your bizarre psychology beliefs, things you've completely made up. A psychologist is accountable to wider psychology. They're expected to adhere to standard psychology in academia. When I do assessments about groups like this, I follow the science. If I'm wrong or misunderstanding something, I don't say this is my belief, so that's just how it is. People can refer back to the academic materials that I reference and decide if what I'm saying is actually correct and reflects the science or not. What you say is the final stop.
Contrary to what most people would imagine, I don't consider myself the ultimate authority. And interestingly enough, I base a lot of authority in any given situation on excellence.
She takes her sweet time explaining excellence, so I'll explain what she means. She gives an example of an accountant. They're an expert in accounting. She isn't an authority on accounting. That's why she hired them, because they know what they're doing in that field way better than she does. Same with surgery. If she's in an operating room, she isn't the authority in that room. The surgeon is. And she says that she's the authority in spiritual matters, which is a roundabout way of saying, yes, I'm the final authority. Explain it any way you want. That's what it boils down to. You consider yourself the world's leading expert in your little branch of psychology and spirituality, which you're making up on the spot. And as such, everybody has to come to you for information and understanding. Nobody can appeal to a higher authority on the subject if they think you're wrong. You started out by denying this point and then explained why it actually does apply to you. But there's nothing wrong with that. So does it apply or not? Spoiler alert, it does.
8. The group teaches or implies that its supposedly exalted ends justify whatever means it deems necessary. This may result in members participating in behaviors or activities they would have considered reprehensible or unethical before joining the group. For example, lying to family and friends or collecting money for bogus charities.
I honestly don't think this model should cite examples. It just leads to cults using it to prove it doesn't apply to them. But this point is actually an interesting one. Having an ends justify the means attitude. Jehovah's Witnesses have this written right into their theology with their theocratic warfare practice, and Scientology has it written into their theology with the fair game doctrine. Doing whatever it takes, even breaking the law, is justified if it's in the name of furthering the goals of the group or the leadership. Lying, cheating, manipulating, even hurting somebody is perfectly acceptable and even encouraged in some cases, as long as it's used to give the group an advantage. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses are pacifists. They don't believe in violence at all, unless it's being committed by Jehovah himself. But Scientology isn't as pacifistic. Either way, the philosophies are the same, and it's something you find in a lot of cults.
If somebody feels like something they are doing is reprehensible or unethical or out of alignment with who they are, they shouldn't do it. That is a personal message from your own guidance system saying this is a no for you.
But that's the point. It says it may result in members participating in behaviors or activities they would have considered reprehensible or unethical before joining the group. It doesn't say members participate in behaviors or activities that they actively currently think are reprehensible. The point is that the group is modifying the members' personality to shape their moral compass into something more useful to the group. Just about every cult says integrity is important. Don't do something you think is wrong. That's not the issue. The issue is the group slowly and gradually changing what the members view as wrong. There's a lot more to this list. It's pretty long, and at some point I'll probably cover it in more detail because it's valuable to have more insight from outside the bite model, though the bite model is extremely useful. Teal Swan's cult, Teal Tribe, seems transparently cult-like to me. I know her followers don't like that fact, but that's just what it is. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I sell all kinds of shirts and stickers and stuff on there. Second, you can support me by checking out my Etsy store. I sell 3D printed stands for every system, from the original Nintendo to the Xbox One. And finally, if you want to support me in other ways, you can check me out on my other channels. I have the podcast channel, which is where I talk about whatever's on my mind. Politics, social issues, whatever. You can also find it everywhere podcasts can be found. Or you can check out the videos on my main channel where I focus on destructive cults. As it is with most channels these days, I rely on the support of viewers like you to keep my channel alive, so sharing my work is extremely helpful. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.